Today, there are countless surveys, television shows, and even movies telling us that if we don't make drastic changes with regards to our relationship with the planet, beautiful species will become extinct. Fair enough, but come on. You know, and I know, that our natural instinct tells us to think of ourselves first, and the planet second, if at all. For years, cities and our cosmopolitan way of life have been creating a chasm between the planet and us. And though media has been telling us rather dramatically, the earth is crying out for your help, have we ever stopped to think for a minute that maybe it is us who is actually suffering? Now, you're all familiar with the term ADD, Attention Deficit Disorder. Well, start getting familiar with the term NDD, Nature Deficit Disorder. This term was coined by a journalist named Richard Louv, and he alleges that children are spending less and less time outdoors, and the result is a wide array of behavioral problems. They are depressed. Their imagination is suffering. They are becoming obese. Now, this term has yet to be recognized medically, but it makes sense to me, because whenever I look at kids today, they're all doing this and this. It's as if their faces are being sucked in by their electronics. Thank you. But so that we can be better people on an emotional, intellectual, and spiritual level, we need to once again reconnect ourselves with what is outdoors. And not because it will lead to a better world, though it will, but for our own well-being. We need to once again give nature the opportunity to heal us. Now, when my friends discovered that I would be giving this talk, they were quite surprised, because I am actually not an ecologist, nor am I a conservation expert. I'm just a regular person. But I was raised in a culture of conservation, and I was also raised to discover what was in my own backyard. And in many ways, this has made me the person that I am today. A curious person, an explorer. I was born in Canada, and my parents were strict and ambitious. For example, I wasn't allowed to watch any television, and I had to get up very early on weekends to learn how to read music rather than sleep in. And heaven forbid I should want to go to a party with boys, because then Mom and Dad would say, "Caterina, dear, this is why we gave you a brother. Now run along and play with him." My parents spent the most of their money on our extracurricular activities, whether it was violin or ballet or language studies or skiing. And they didn't have much left over for trips to exotic locations. So instead, we would go camping and canoeing, trekking in the snow, we would go to the forest and hunt for berries, and we would visit the farms to see how they made maple syrup. Exciting times. I found as I got older that I was spending the better part of my evenings with my cheek pressed up against my window pane, looking up at that night sky, just dreaming of taking a plane somewhere. My mother was thrilled because she interpreted this as me having a newfound passion for astronomy, and went out and bought me a powerful telescope and a subscription to National Geographic and Sky News magazine. So by the time I graduated from university, I knew that I needed to stretch my legs. I wanted to be an adventurer. I wanted to see the world. And when I turned 23, with a little bit of luck and a lot of hard work, I earned a position as a cultural and economic correspondent for the Times of London and the Washington Post. Thank you. I went on to travel to over 30 countries, including Uganda, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates. Sometimes I would feel homesick, but all I had to do was look up at that night sky, and I could still hear Mom's voice behind my ear whispering, look, there's Jupiter, and there's the North Star. And even though to this day I still have difficulties telling the difference between stars and planets, it was her enthusiasm for the unknown, for the outdoors, that caught my attention. And in many ways, that enthusiasm has given me a greater craving for life today. Like with most things, it is our parents who are the first people to either get us afraid or excited about the unknown. And when I was traveling, there was plenty of unknown, but I embraced the adventure. However, the constant noise and pollution of living in some of these ultra-urban metropolises was starting to have a very negative effect on me. But thank goodness for the weekend, because that's when I would get out of the city and rush to the nearest sea, desert, lake, or forest. And there I would inhale fresh air and leave refreshed with new ideas. When I was living in Cairo, I had the opportunity to meet with the very famous Dr. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's oft controversial Minister of Antiquities. And though he had plenty to say about the pyramids, he also told me, if you want to know Egypt, travel east by car through the jagged mountains of the Sinai Peninsula to the Red Sea. And I, who had only ever known the dark, muggy waters of the great Canadian lakes, will never forget my astonishment when I opened my eyes underwater for the first time to a world more colorful and magical than I could have ever imagined. And when I am here in the UAE, it is my time in the desert that moves me. When I plunge my hand into that hot desert sand and look before a sea of endless dunes under a vast sky, I feel a sense of calm, and I become still. I grew up camping in the bush, but in the UAE, I have slept in the desert under a blanket of stars. After a while, I decided to unpack my suitcase and settle in Paris. I'd spent the first 15 years of my life immersed in the arts and wanted to once again surround myself with the things I loved: music, performance, nature. So I decided to create a company, but I didn't have any money to hire a payroll of artists. So I turned to my artistic friends and through word of mouth garnered a collective of over 50 outstanding artists from all corners of the world who today create cultural projects for this region. All of the artists are unique. One architect, Frank Mint, has for 10 years designed outdoor exhibitions in some of the world's most beautiful squares. These exhibitions bring people face to face with spectacular images of environmental or wildlife causes. Stockholm, Amsterdam, Vienna, Lisbon. By transforming the street, the architect, along with the photographer, are able to pass a message and make a strong statement. These exhibitions tickle the curiosity of city walkers. So whether or not you're interested in conservation projects, by creating this visual confrontation, a dialogue is created between you and the message. And the message is very basic, but it is also quite powerful. What each one of these images is saying is, look at me, I exist here. How about getting to know me a little bit better? So whether or not you've ever thought about going to the zoo to see the Arabian oryx, we're going to bring it and 99 other Arabian species directly to you, and hopefully will surprise you. So one day I was brainstorming with Frank the architect, and I said to him, we have to take your design, bring it to the Gulf, and showcase their incredible biodiversity. We'll call it Wild Arabia. What do you think? He responded quite dryly, showcase what biodiversity. Showcase what biodiversity. This is when I knew that we had to do this project here and that we could use art as a tool for conservation. Too many people who have never stepped foot in this country think that the United Arab Emirates doesn't have a wildlife to protect, doesn't have an environment to conserve, that this is just a construction site. Well, hold on to your seats, because unless those buildings fell out of the sky, I am 99.9% certain that at one point in time, and you might want to keep this just between us, but Paris was also a construction site. Vancouver, which is known around the world as a premier outdoor playground, has one of the most impressive cement city skylines. And not too long ago, it was also a construction site. Together we have the power to show another facet of this country. Let's bring these critics face to face with the mighty power of the Arabian leopard, with the soaring elegance of the peregrine falcon, with the playful innocence of the sandcat. Before people can care about this wildlife and think about protecting it, they need to know that it exists. Like many countries, the United Arab Emirates has also created a number of environment-related conventions. Abu Dhabi is home to the Mohammed bin Zayed Species Conservation Fund. This fund was born with the world's largest endowment for the protection of wildlife. And not just Arabian wildlife, but wildlife across the globe. Archive is a company in the UK, and they have the biggest wildlife online image bank. These images and information can be used freely in the schools and for any educational purposes. Archive is funded by the Abu Dhabi Environment Authority. So when I learn of these initiatives, I realize that in many ways, the United Arab Emirates is actually a leader in creating and communicating a culture of conservation on a local and international level. And really, this should come as a surprise to no one. The UAE's founding father, the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, said at the country's first Environment Day in 1988, if I may quote him, "With God's will, we shall continue to protect our environment and its wildlife. It is our duty. And if we fail, our children, rightly so, will reproach us for having squandered an essential part of their inheritance and of our heritage." Here we are in the beautiful city of Al-Ain. This is what is outside this building. How good do you feel when you look at this picture? Imagine how good we are going to feel when we step outside into this environment, this oasis of date palms, acacia, and eucalyptus trees. I am asking you to really look at it with your eyes and your heart open, and think of how lucky we are. Creating a culture of conservation starts with opening your eyes, being proud of what you see. And when we are in nature, we are able to far more appreciate what we have in our lives. Our minds slow down, and we take in the landscape around us. Being in nature is the perfect place to think about creating a better tomorrow for ourselves and for our families. Thank you.